Myself, Dr. G. Prasanna, working as an assistant professor in the Department of Genetics and Plant Breeding at School of Agriculture, SR University, Warangal. Today we'll discuss about the most important topic that is about plant genetic resources. In this lecture, we'll discuss about what are plant genetic resources and what are the important features of the plant genetic resources, and we'll study about the gene pool classification and types of seed collections, and what are the major steps involved in the germplasm conservation, and next is about the major agencies which are working with this plant genetic resources. So these are the some of the topics we'll discuss in this lecture, that is plant genetic resources. First, we will discuss about what are the plant genetic resources. Plant genetic resources are nothing but it is a sum total of the hereditary material. Means it includes all the alleles of various genes which are present in the cross species as well as its wild relatives are nothing but germplasm. Whereas it is also nothing but it is a sum total of genes in a cross species is also referred to as the genetic resources. And this plant genetic resources are also known as gene pool or genetic stock or germplasm or genetic resources. So here these are the two scientists which are worked extensively on the plant genetic resources, that is Vavilov and Dr. H.B. Singh. These are the two scientists which are extensively worked on the plant genetic resources. Next, coming to main features of the plant genetic resources. Generally, these plant genetic resources represents the entire variations which are present in the crop species, and this includes it also includes various kinds of germplasm like land races, modern cultivars, obsolete cultivars, breeding stocks, wild forms and wild species. These land races are nothing but these are the primitive cultivars which were developed and cultivated by farmers without any systematic breeding efforts. And next is modern cultivars. These are presently cultivated cultivars are nothing but modern cultivars. And next is obsolete cultivars. Obsolete cultivars are nothing but these are the varieties of the recent past, means which are popular once upon a time, but they are replaced by some of the high yielding modern cultivars that are nothing but obsolete cultivars. And next is breeding stocks. Breeding stocks are nothing but these are the some of the pre-released plants. And next is wild forms and wild species. So these are the some of the common ancestry of the cultivated species. So these are the some of the kinds of germplasm which are present. And next coming to the sources of plant genetic resources, we can get from the centers of diversity and from the gene banks and from the gene sanctuaries and from farmer fields, markets and some of the seed companies we can get this. And next the germplasm will be indigenous or exotic. Indigenous means we can procure the germplasm within the country, or we can procure the germplasm from foreign countries. So these are the some of the important features of the plant genetic resources. That is, it represents the entire variation present in the crop species. And next it includes seven kinds of germplasm. And next coming to the sources, and next the germplasm will be indigenous or exotic. So these are the some of the important features of the plant genetic resources. And next coming to the kinds of germplasm. So generally each crop will be having different kinds of germplasm. The first one is land races, and the second one is obsolete cultivars, and the third one is modern cultivars. Fourth one is advanced breeding lines. The advanced breeding lines, they are mostly homozygous. And next is wild forms of cultivated species, and next wild relatives, and the last one is mutants. So these are the seven kinds of germplasm. We'll discuss one by one. First one is land races. What are land races? Everyone know that land races are these are the primitive cultivars which were developed by the farmers generation after generation without any systematic breeding effort. That is nothing but land races. And generally these land races will have the high genetic diversity. It means there is more amount of the genetic diversity present in the land races. And generally the land races will have broad genetic base. Broad genetic means if the land races are having broad genetic base, it means they are more resistant to both biotic and abiotic stresses. And main disadvantage of these land races are they are less uniform and low yielders. Less uniform is they are not completely uniform throughout the field, and they are less low yielders when compared to the modern cultivars. That is about the land races. And next is obsolete cultivars. Obsolete cultivars are nothing but these are the varieties. These are the varieties of recent past are nothing. Varieties of recent past are nothing but obsolete cultivars. These obsolete cultivars are nothing but these are the varieties which are popular once upon a time, but they are replaced by some of the high yielding modern varieties are nothing but obsolete cultivars. Thus, some of the examples of wheat are P65 and P68. These are tall and traditional wheat varieties which are replaced by some of the high yielding Mexican dwarf wheat varieties. Generally, these obsolete cultivars are having good quality traits also. And next, coming to modern cultivars are nothing but the presently cultivating varieties are nothing but the modern cultivars. Generally, these cultivars will give the more yield, and they are also uniformity. They are having more uniformity. And next, here the modern cultivars are having narrow genetic base. If the genetic base is narrow, mostly the cultivars become susceptible to abiotic and abiotic stresses. So here the difference between land races and modern cultivars are generally the land races are having high genetic diversity, whereas the modern cultivars having less diversity, less genetic diversity, and these land races are having broad genetic base, and here the modern cultivars are having narrow genetic base, because here the genetic base is broad, so they are resistant to both biotic and abiotic stresses. Here the modern cultivars is narrow genetic base, so they are mostly susceptible to biotic and abiotic stresses. And here the land races are low yielders, whereas here the modern cultivars are high yielders. Here the land races are not uniform, and the modern cultivars are mostly uniform. So these are the some of the difference between the land races and modern cultivars. And next, coming to advanced breeding lines. These advanced breeding lines are nothing but these are the pre-released plants. Mostly they are the homozygous. They are nearly homozygous plants, and they are biotechnology derived plants. Next, coming to wild forms. Here, the wild forms and wild relatives are mostly they are resistant to. They are having higher resistance to both biotic and abiotic stresses. And here, the wild forms are mostly crossed with crops. And next is wild relatives. Wild relatives are nothing but these are the common ancestry of the cultivated species, and which are having the source of the useful genes. And next is mutants. Mutants is nothing but generally the mutation breeding is used when there is no variation present in the cultivated species. The mutation breeding mostly it will be natural. Natural mutations are we can induce through physical or chemical mutations. Generally, the mutants will add the variability. So these are the 7 different kinds of germplasm. So here you can see the land races of wheat in Afghanistan, and here the obsolete wheat variety. There is a obsolete wheat variety is nothing but this is the traditional wheat variety, which is a tall variety, which was popular once upon a time, but it was replaced by some of the Mexican dwarf wheat varieties. And next is durum wheat. Durum wheat. So these are the some of the examples of the kinds of germplasm. Next, coming to gene pool classification, based on the degree of relationship, the gene pool classification was done into 4 types by Harland and Debet in 1971. There are 4 different types of gene pool classification. The first one is primary gene pool classification, and the second one is secondary gene pool classification. Third one is tertiary gene pool, and the fourth one is quotient gene pool. Here, the first one is primary gene pool. Primary gene pool is also called as gene pool 1. It is called as gene pool 1. In primary gene pool, the genetic material, the hereditary material which was obtained will produce a fertile hybrids on crossing. Generally, the primary gene pool forms a major component of the breeding program. So, next is secondary gene pool. The secondary gene pool is also called as gene pool 2. The hereditary material which was obtained on crossing with primary gene pool, it will produce some of the fertile hybrids, whereas some of the sterile hybrids. Whereas the gene transfer is very difficult in case of secondary gene pool. And next is tertiary gene pool. Tertiary gene pool is also called as gene pool 3. Generally, the hereditary material obtained will be sterile hybrids and crossing with primary gene pool. Generally, to transfer the genes, it requires the special techniques. So this is about the tertiary gene pool, and the next is ocean gene pool. This is a newly added gene pool. That is the ocean gene pool or quaternary gene pool. It is also called as gene pool 4. Generally, this gene pool is available by using some of the advanced technologies of genetic engineering. So these are the four different types of gene pool classification. The first one is the primary gene pool. Here we can produce the fertile hybrids, and next is secondary gene pool. Here we'll produce the partial fertile hybrids, whereas while crossing with primary gene pool, whereas in tertiary gene pool we'll get the completely sterile hybrids and crossing with primary gene pool. And next is ocean gene pool. Here this is a newly added gene pool which will be available by using the advanced genetic engineering technologies. So these are some of the four gene pools we can observe. So here you can see the first circle you can see the gene pool 1, which includes the biological species, cultivated species, and all. So here we'll obtain the fertile hybrids, and next is the secondary gene pool. In the secondary gene pool, all the species which were crossed with the primary gene pool will produce some of the fertile hybrids, and mostly are the sterile hybrids we can observe in the secondary gene pool. And for in the secondary gene pool, the gene transfer is difficult. And next is the third, and here third, this is the in third you can see the tertiary gene pool. In tertiary gene pool, we can produce the hybrids, completely sterile hybrids we can produce that are nothing but lethal hybrids crossing with primary gene pool. And next, and in case of tertiary gene pool, the gene transfer is very difficult, but by using some specialized techniques we can transfer the gene. And next is this is the GP4, that is gene pool 4. In gene pool 4, by using some of the advanced genetic engineering technologies, we can use in the ocean gene pool. So this is about the gene pool classification, which was given by Harlan and Dewitt in 1971. And next, coming to types of seed collections, based on the storability, the seeds are classified into four collections, that is base collections, active collections, working collections, and core collections. The first one is base collections. Base collections are nothing but these are the principal collections which will mostly used in the breeding methods. Generally, these seeds are stored at minus 18 degrees to minus 20 degrees temperature with 5 plus or minus 1% moisture content. By this temperature and by this moisture content, the germplasm can store for a longer time. For 100 years, we can store the germplasm in case of base collections. In case of base collection, the duplicate collections will be maintained because the base collection is mostly used for regeneration purpose. So in one lot, the seed viability is lost. We can get the source from the other lot. So the base collection is mostly used for the regeneration purpose. And next is active collections. Active collections are nothing but here the seeds are stored at below 15 degrees temperature with 5% moisture content, and we can store the germplasm for 10 to 15 years. We can store the germplasm, that is active collections. And next is working collections. Working collections are nothing but these are the here the seeds are stored below 15 degrees temperature with 10% moisture content. We can store the seeds for very short period for 3 to 5 years. Mostly the collections, these are the collections which are widely used in the breeding programs, that is the working collections. And next is core collections. This core collection is nothing but it is a subset of the base collections, and the term core collection was given by Sir Otto Frankel. Generally, this core collection is nothing but it is a large collection. So these are the based on the storability. The seeds are the collections are four types, that is base collection, active collection, working collections, and core collections. And these working collections are mostly used in the breeding programs by the breeders, and this base collection is mostly used for the regeneration purpose. So these are the different types of seed collections. And next is Coming to the germplasm activities, there are 6 germplasm activities which are involved. The first one is exploration and collection, and the second one is conservation, third one is evaluation, the fourth one is documentation, fifth one is multiplication and distribution, and the sixth one is utilization. So we'll discuss one by one. The first one is exploration and collection. Exploration and collection is nothing but, first is exploration. Exploration is nothing but there is a scientific trips. Scientific trips is nothing but exploring to the going to the different parts of the country and collecting the genetic diversity which was present in the different places, and we have to keep in one place. That is nothing but exploration and collection, which includes different methods of collection, different method of agency. You can observe in the exploration and collection. And next is conservation. Conservation is nothing but it is nothing but the protection of germplasm, whether it is whether in natural habitat or from the human interference. It is nothing but conservation. Generally, the conservation is done in generally there are two methods for conservation. That is in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. We'll discuss later. And next is evaluation. Evaluation is here we'll discuss about conservation. That is we will be having two methods for the germplasm conservation. One is in situ conservation and the second one is ex situ conservation. First we'll discuss about the in situ conservation. In situ conservation is nothing but the conservation of the germplasm in its natural habitat. It's nothing but in situ conservation, which includes examples in natural habitats is nothing but it includes the gene sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, or natural parks. So the conservation of the germplasm in its natural habitat is nothing but in situ conservation. So these are the some of the examples for in situ conservation, that is gene sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, and natural parks. And generally over a time we can observe the new alleles. And next is for some of the crops there are some of the conservations for the germplasm. For citrus, the germplasm conservation is located in Meghalaya, and for banana, for rice, and for sugarcane it is located in the northeastern India. And the major drawback of in situ conservation is it is very costly, and the handling of germplasm is also very difficult, and this in situ conservation covers only a small part of genetic diversity, and they are having the management issues. So this is about the in situ conservation. Here we can conserve the germplasm in the natural habitat, and over a period of time we can observe the formation of new alleles. And here the main drawback are it is very costly, and it covers only a small part of the genetic diversity. This is about in situ conservation. And next is ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation is the conservation of germplasm away from the natural habitat. That are nothing but gene banks. The gene banks will be different types again. There's field gene banks, or seed gene banks, or organ gene banks, DNA gene. There are so many different gene banks is there. So that is nothing but ex situ conservation. The conservation of germplasm from its natural habitat is nothing but ex situ conservation. So the main advantage of ex situ conservation is it covers the full genetic diversity, whereas in situ conservation, which covers only a small part of the genetic diversity, but this ex situ conservation will cover the full amount of genetic diversity, and it is very easy to handle, and it is very cost effective. Whereas in situ conservation covers only small part of the genetic diversity, and it is very difficult to handle, and it is very costly in situ conservation. Whereas for seed conservation also we are having based on the storability, the seeds are two types, that is orthodox seeds and recurrent seeds. First we will discuss about the orthodox seeds. Orthodox seeds are nothing but we can suppose if the seeds are dried for less than 5% moisture content, the seeds will be mostly viable, and they can store up to 100 years. So that are nothing but orthodox seeds. Mostly the orthodox seeds includes the field crops, examples wheat and rice. And next is recurrent seeds. Recurrent seeds are nothing. Generally, these seeds are very sensitive to drying, because if the moisture content drops below 12 to 30%, the seeds will lose the viability. So that are nothing but recurrent seeds. So examples for these recurrent seeds are all the forest and fruit crops comes under the recurrent seeds. Examples are mango, cocoa, cocoa and coffee, tea, rubber, all this comes under the recurrent seeds. So examples for orthodox seeds are field crops. For recurrent seeds, it is forest and fruit trees. So this is about the extensive conservation, and generally the conservation is done in different forms. Generally, the the germplasm is stored in the glass or plastic containers. So for this for storing the seeds, we require very small space. So extensive conservation is very easy to handle, and it covers the whole part of the genetic diversity. So here the conservation is done in 5 different forms. The first one is seed gene banks. Here we can conserve the germplasm in the form of seed. And next is the plant or field gene banks. Here also we can conserve the germplasm in the plant or field in the field. And next is shoot gene banks, and the fourth one is cell and organ gene banks, and the fifth one is DNA gene banks. Here, have you heard about the cryopreservation? That is nothing but and the storage of cells at minus 196 degrees is nothing but cryopreservation. So, so here we can we can conserve the germplasm in different forms, in the form of seed, plant, field, or shoot tips, or cell or organ, or DNA gene banks. So these are some of the different types of conservations we can see. And next, coming to third. Third step, that is evaluation. Now we have completed the conservation, that is about in situ conservation and ex situ conservation, and we have discussed in detail. And next, third step is evaluation. After conservation, we have to evaluate the germplasm. Evaluation is nothing but the screening of germplasm is nothing but evaluation. The screening of germplasm is done with respect to the physiological, morphological, and biochemical characters. So generally, for all these characters, the screening of germplasm is done. So this evaluation is done by some of the experts from different departments like breeding, physiology, and next pathology and entomology. So some of the team experts from the IPGRI. IPGRI is nothing but International Plant Genetic Research Institute, which was located in the Rome, Italy. So some of the experts from that institute will help in the screening of the germplasm. And generally, the screening was done in three different levels. It was done, the germplasm screening is done in the field level, whereas it also done in the greenhouse level, and next in the lab. So these are the at three ways we can do the screening of the germplasm by different experts from different departments. And next is documentation. Documentation is nothing but it is also called as information system. Information system is nothing but we are gathering the information about all the germplasm, about everything. We have to collect the data of the germplasm. That is nothing but documentation. And after documentation, uh, that is multiplication and distribution. Multiplication and distribution is nothing but here we have to whatever the germplasm we obtain, we have to multiply and we have to distribute to the users based on their need. And then next is utilization. Utilization is nothing but after multiplication and distribution, it is utilized in the breeding programs as a wild germplasm. Here you can see it can be utilized as a wild germplasm or cultivated germplasm. For cultivated germplasm, we can use directly as a variety, as a parent in crossing, or as a variant in the gene pool. Whereas wild germplasm, generally the germplasm is widely used for transferring the resistance, like biotic and abiotic stress resistance, and mostly the wild germplasm is having more adaptability, and next they are having more quality traits. They are having more good quality traits. So this is about the world germplasm. And next is the key organizations. These are the two key organizations which was working with the germplasm. That is, first one is IPGRI. IPGRI is nothing but International Plant Genetic Research Institute, which was located in the Rome, Italy. This is an institute which is located at the international level, which will be handling the germplasm. And next is at national level, that is National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, which was established in 1970, which is located in New Delhi, which is responsible for all the germplasm activities which are involved within the country. So these are the two main institutes which are working with the plant genetic resources. Next, coming to conclusion, as we discuss as a total, the germ here we discussed about the what is the germplasm. Germplasm is nothing but it's the sum total of the hereditary material. It means all the alleles of various genes which are present in its crop species as well as in wild relatives is nothing but germplasm. Generally, the germplasm will represent the entire genetic variation which was present in a crop species, and this germplasm there are seven different kinds of germplasm are present, that are land races, obsolete cultivars, modern cultivars, advanced breeding lines, wild forms, wild relatives, and mutants we have discussed earlier. And next is based on the crossability and based on the degree of relationship, they have a gene pool was classified into four different types, that is primary, secondary, tertiary, and ocean gene pool. This is the ocean gene pool is a newly added gene pool, that is the tertiary gene pool, which will deals with genetic engineering technologies. And next is germplasm activities. In germplasm activity, we are having the 6 steps, that is exploration and collection, conservation. It is of two types again, in-situ conservation and ex-situ conservation we have discussed. And next is evaluation, documentation, multiplication, and utilization. So these are the some 6 germplasm activities which are involved. And next is conservation. This conservation was done in gene sanctuaries or gene banks or tissue culture and DNA banks. Generally, this germplasm is mostly important for the crop improvement to transfer the traits like yield, resistance, adaptability, and quality from wild species to the cultivated species. So this is about the lecture. Thank you.